The year is 2025, but today sure felt like a throwback. A big Cowboys trade for a dynamic wide receiver. Jane Slater joins us from Dallas as we break down the George Pickens deal from all angles, including what it might say about the Steelers' plan at quarterback. Tom Brady has put his stamp on every aspect of the Raiders football operation, so do we really believe he wasn't involved at all in evaluating the quarterback that he personally mentored? Hear what Brady had to say about Shedeur Sanders' draft slide and Mark Ross's thoughts on the QB battle in Cleveland. The Browns are just one of 26 teams opening rookie minicamps this week. And we've got storylines galore. Jeffrey Chadia will tell you what he's looking for, including with the number one pick and a certain two-way star in Jacksonville. Welcome inside with the Insiders alongside Ian Rappaport and Mike Garafolo. I am Tom Pelissero. 120 days away from the kickoff of the NFL season, just 7 days away. 1 week from tonight, we will get the full 2025 NFL schedule, which also means we'll find out when the first time is we'll see George Pickens in a regular season game with the star on his helmet. That is where we begin on May 7th, where we get a big-time NFL trade. Cowboys agreeing to terms to acquire George Pickens along with a 2027 sixth-round pick from the Steelers in exchange for a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick. Ian, from the moment that the Steelers both acquired and paid DK Metcalf, it seemed pretty apparent that George Pickens' days were numbered. The question was when and who would end up being the suitor that emerges, and it does sound like this came together pretty quickly. What more do we know?
It did come together pretty quickly after the draft, and you're right. You rarely see trades, blockbuster trades, after the draft because usually teams want to get the draft picks for this coming draft, make them, have the players, then everyone kind of moves on. That did not happen here. Negotiations take the form and time that they take, so that simply was the case here. This was just the right time to do this deal, but the two sides did talk before the draft, and I know there was some hope from the Dallas Cowboys that this would get done before the draft, just to make sure that they had a number two receiver to CeeDee Lamb. Obviously did not happen, and so here we are today. And from the Cowboys' perspective, clearly what they did was look around in free agency and say, we do not see a number two receiver out there. We do not see the kind of help that we want. It took a while, obviously more than they wanted, but once again, and they've done several of these this offseason, swung a big trade to get Dak Prescott the kind of all-in help that they have been teasing for 2 years. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, George Pickens has played excellent. He has been a great, great receiver, but it is a lot. And you get to the point after a player finishes his third season, Mike, you say, is this a person we want long-term with the Steelers? Are we going to pay him? The Steelers clearly decided they were not going to pay him. They move on from George Pickens, get a third-round pick plus in the deal.
Ian, that was fantastically said by you, except for one little mistake that you just said. You said it was all in by the Dallas Cowboys. No. That was last year. This year, selectively aggressive. And we had our laugh with selectively aggressive. Ha! Selectively. Oh, sure. Just pick and choose. This is selectively aggressive right here. And it's aggressive because you know what you're getting. You're getting a guy that, Mike Tomlin, during Hard Knocks, you could hear him talking about George Pickens when something happened in the first quarter against the Bengals. I think it was like a fumble 6 or an interception 6 off his hands or something like that. He's like, hey, I need you. That's not going to determine the game. Stay with me. I need your head in the game because you got to manage George Pickens because there's a lot of emotion there. But the Cowboys believe that they have the infrastructure with a first-year head coach, mind you. It's a lot of confidence in Brian Schottenheimer, that they can foster this relationship and that their quarterback and the skins that he has on his wall, as from an individual standpoint, can handle it as well. And it affords you the ability then, if you believe in all of that, to be selectively aggressive. And so they make this move without a long-term contract in place, which is fine because this is a good spot to have George Pickens when he's got something to prove moving forward here if he wants that big payday.
And this is nothing new with George Pickens when we're talking about the things off the field. It's part of the reason he was a second-round pick and not a first-rounder in the draft. I know the Steelers were disappointed with how George Pickens had approached and handled certain things here. As Ian said, they just weren't going to pay him. So essentially you take the compensatory draft pick you would have gotten a year early and ensure that you actually get that pick regardless of what you do in free agency next year. So now take a look at these Steelers and Cowboys wide receiver depth charts. This screen right here, I think, would have been unthinkable if you take a time machine back 2 months ago. Wait a second. DK Metcalf is in Pittsburgh. George Pickens is in Dallas. Yes, this is real. There's been a lot of action in recent months. Let's bring in our Jane Slater and Mark Ross to the conversation. Jane, we were just talking with you yesterday about Brian Schottenheimer trying to establish the culture in Dallas. George Pickens is an interesting fit in any culture, but he is a hell of a wide receiver. From the Cowboys' perspective, what do they feel like they're getting here?
You know, it's interesting. When I started catching some wind of this, it was catching some speed last night around about 11 p.m. And I got to imagine Jerry Jones is enjoying his Johnny Walker Blue somewhere as he celebrates this. I don't believe we'd be talking about George Pickens if T-Mac McMillan had been there for them in the first round. But we all talked about, and even though they tried to sell us on Jonathan Mingo, that they needed a true number two. I think he's going to be seen more as 1A, 1B. This is a guy that's going to be big-bodied on the outside. They consider him a top-level wide receiver, extremely competitive, elite ball skills. As I was told, he adds an explosive element and can create plenty of what was called math problems for the defense. In other words, someone will get extra attention, which means someone else will capitalize. That was a text from one of my sources on this one. Now, one of the questions, and to tie this back in with what you said there, Tom, well, I thought Brian Schottenheimer was all about the culture. Well, let's get into that with George Pickens. You know, when I asked someone close to him, what is the deal? What is the real skinny on this? Because a lot of these narratives, they get the ball going and you see how, I think, animated some of these wide receivers can be. And maybe we get kind of a different perspective on it. The word I was used is there needs to be some maturation here. This is a guy who wants to make an impact on the game, and he wants the ball. No different than a lot of wide receivers out there. But it's my understanding he had a great relationship with the guys in the locker room and his quarterbacks. And when you look at the quarterbacks he was dealing with in Pittsburgh, no disrespect, we are talking about a little bit of a different quarterback here with Dak Prescott. And when you look at the capability that both CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens have now. I saw you put Jalen Tolbert out there. Let's not forget Kevontae Turpin and some of his speed and some of the ways that they're using Kevontae Turpin on the field. Then you pair him with, you know, Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue. I think they've made some real, Miles Sanders. They've made some really smart, selectively aggressive moves on offense. And then they got lucky there by bringing in a guy like Tyler Booker. They've moved guys around in the locker room. They've made a point of emphasis about building up this leadership. They've always had the leadership council in Dallas. But the issue, I think, for the last 2 years was you could definitely feel like some of the chemistry was off. I think the one thing that sets Shoddy apart, and a lot of people that don't know him don't know this, yes, he's a really great communicator. And I think wide receivers like George Pickens, not dissimilar from guys like Des Bryant, I think they do well when they have coaches that are great communicators, and you're getting that with Brian Schottenheimer here in Dallas.
Mark, as we look at this from the Steelers' perspective, James is talking about putting weapons around Dak. We still don't know who the Steelers' quarterback is going to be. We do know their receiver core has really been overhauled. When you look at this deal from Pittsburgh's perspective, what do you see?
Well, just from a football standpoint, I think for Pittsburgh, it was addition by subtraction. And not George Pickens, the player, because we've seen the flashes of brilliance there, but also some ups and downs on the field. But it's more of the off the field. And production equals tolerance when you're dealing with a player who has some issues. And that means the more productive you are, the more you'll put up with some of the off the field issues. But once that starts waning, and it's more the lack of production off the field from George Pickens that I have heard, that's when things get bad for you. No one has been able to put up with production equal tolerance like Mike Tomlin, particularly at the wide receiver position when you go through the Antonio Browns and Chase Claypools and Deontay Johnsons of the world that they've already gone through. And now he's had George Pickens. So that's the worry, is that if Mike Tomlin has said, you know what, guys, enough is enough here, we have to really start thinking about the team. And I think for the Steelers' perspective, it's, yes, they finally had to say, let's think about the team. I'm sure they tried to trade George Pickens during the draft, and that's why we are here where we are now with Dallas making this trade now. So I think for the Pittsburgh perspective, whoever's the quarterback, they're a little bit stuck now because you think, okay, now we have DK, now we've got George, and now you're back to square one again. Well, actually, we just have DK. So someone's going to have to step up in the receiver position.
I just wanted to touch on something that Mark was saying there, Tom, because a lot of people have said, well, if Mike Tomlin can't handle George Pickens, why would the Cowboys? There is a unique situation here in the sense that, you know, they were ultimately going to have to pay him a new deal. And so the big question is, are the Cowboys going to go ahead and extend him before that number jumps up? And of course, you've got Micah Parsons to figure out and a couple of other guys coming down the pipe. I talked to people that are close to the situation. They are not planning on extending him right now. I think both sides want to see a prove it here, and I think that's good for all parties here. Keep in mind, they could also use the franchise tag if they want to extend this thing out. But I think that's some of the leverage that the Cowboys have here that sort of, I think, incentivizes George Pickens to buy in here as it relates to the locker room, this offense, and the coaching staff.
Or if George Pickens ends up walking without being tagged next March, then potentially you're getting that pick right back in terms of the compensatory formula just a year later. Jane, thank you very much. Mark, more from you coming up in just a little bit here. It has been quite the offseason in Pittsburgh. We have talked a lot of Steelers on this show. It all goes back to that Sunday night before free agency when they traded for DK Metcalf, gave him a monster contract. The next day, Justin Fields, the quarterback that they had tried to retain, left for a much better deal, 2 years, $40 million with the New York Jets. A couple weeks after that, Russell Wilson, who had figured out he was not in the Steelers' plans, he leaves for the Giants. Then today, they trade away George Pickens, all of which brings us to this question as Ian and Mike rejoin the conversation. Ian, what do you make of these Steelers' plans, especially at, again, a time that we don't 100% know who their quarterback is going to be?
You know, every year there are people who grumble about Mike Tomlin, obviously one of the best coaches in the NFL, one of the best coaches in NFL history, and you sort of wonder, like, how is he okay just making the playoffs and then you lose early on, and that's that? They are not okay. Mike Tomlin is not okay. Omar Khan is not okay. The Steelers are not okay. And the reason we know this, look at what they did this offseason. Every important piece of their offense, besides Pat Freiermuth, is gone. George Pickens, their top receiver, gone. Najee Harris, starting running back, gone. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, their two quarterbacks in a two-headed quarterback monster, both gone. Left tackle Dan Moore, gone. The Steelers clearly decided, Mike, this was not good enough. This was not good enough. They wanted to get better. It changed out several key pieces of their personnel and to go about 2025 hoping for better results. Now, we don't know who their quarterback is going to be. Presumably, that would be Aaron Rodgers. That is what they think and believe. But as of this very minute, we don't know if he's going to play for the Steelers or if he's going to retire. Those seem to be the two options. I know they are hoping for it, but we have no answer. So if they get that locked in, it will be a dramatically different offense from last year.
Ian, one of the things we heard going into the draft, this past draft that just occurred, is that the Steelers were looking to move back potentially in the first round and gather some more ammo in the 2026 draft, and not just because it's in Pittsburgh, but because of the strength of that draft both at the quarterback position and elsewhere. This move today gives them 2 third-round picks next year. You saw all the moves that they have made, or the players that have left, I should say. That is going to likely give them a third-round pick next year. So that's 3 in the third round, plus compensatory picks to follow elsewhere in the draft as well. They're going to have a lot of draft ammunition next year. You could say that like, oh, look at all these picks, but when it comes to getting up, if you want to get up into the top spots for a quarterback, you need more than what they have, but it does give them more going in to gather players in a strong draft and potentially be able to move within that draft as well.
We also saw the Browns and the Rams get extra first-round picks in next year's draft. All that